What is up, everybody? Welcome back, obviously, to the channel. I know it's been way too long since my last upload, what, 4.5, 5 months at this point. Obviously, wanted to apologize for that first and foremost. Things towards the end of last semester with school in terms of final season and whatnot, we're just getting a little bit hectic. So I decided to put the channel on the back burner, and I've obviously wanted to revive it in some way. Just really wasn't sure how I wanted to do so. And then a couple weeks back, one user, Potluckology, shout out to you. He went back and commented on an old video and basically said, hope you're doing well. Looking forward to your upcoming draft videos. And that kind of got the wheels turning in a sense in terms of, at least what you guys, or hopefully some of you guys, would potentially like to see. So for these last couple weeks, my friend Mike and I, who you guys may or may not remember back from our team recap series after last draft, we've been working behind the scenes to put together a bunch of different sort of scouting report / prospect discussion type videos, which hopefully you guys will enjoy. Hopefully you can find them interesting, entertaining, informative, etc. Whatever you guys kind of look to this channel for. So, we already have the first 13 videos recorded, which should be a good week and a half worth of various running backs and defensive ends. So look out for those videos later today. I'm going to try and post the first couple, not to spam your guys' sub boxes, but I figure if we're going to come back with the channel, bring it back, might as well bring it back with a bang. So with that being said, though, before I did move on to another project with the NFL draft, I did want to come to you guys with a video that is long overdue, at least for me. I hate starting something and not finishing it. So I wanted to bring you guys the conclusion to my top 100 series that, I know that's the reason most of you guys found the channel. When I started that series, I was around 20 something subscribers. Now I'm at 73, and that channel, or that series, I should say, is a big reason for that, obviously. So I wanted to go back and kind of put a bow or ribbon of sorts, whatever you guys want to call it, on that series and wrap it up. So obviously we're not going to go 15, 20 minutes on every guy as we did in the individual videos, but I'm just going to pull up the list. We're going to go through the list, each player's PowerPoint, just kind of rattle them off. And that way, in the event that I bring that series back for this summer in some capacity, not sure if it's going to be 100 videos. That was obviously pretty ambitious, but it might just be one long video, maybe a series of them. I'd like to have sort of a point of reference so you guys can see where I was at a year ago and then how that's changed for this last season of games in terms of, whether a guy's stock improved, whether it declined, whether it stayed the same, etc. So with that being said, obviously, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you are a little bit confused, you got to remember this is a list from before any 2020 stuff, right? So, you might see an older player. You might see Drew Brees in the top 25 and say, hey, why is he so high? Well, it's because I thought coming into this season off of last season that's where he should have been. So with that being said, hopefully there's not too much confusion. Hopefully you guys are looking forward to my draft videos later today. And hopefully you guys are looking forward to this video. So we'll hop right in and get into number 63, Nick Chubb. With Nick Chubb then at number 63, he was obviously coming off of a fantastic, nearly 1,500-yard rushing campaign in 2019. To me, the only question was, it was only his second year going into his third. And, we still had that kind of looming question of, could he be the number one option on a team? Obviously, we've seen that out of, say, Christian McCaffrey, out of Ezekiel Elliott, Derrick Henry, etc. The question is, could Chubb really be that guy? And, not to get into the film in 2020, but I think we most certainly had those questions answered despite some injuries and various issues there. I think he still had a fantastic season, and I would most definitely look for Chubb to be on the rise going into 2021. Next up, at number 62, we had Las Vegas Raiders center Rodney Hudson, who, he's obviously pretty widely regarded, or at least has been, as a top 2 center in the league. He and Jason Kelsey, and I really just thought that his short area quickness and his elite hand placement really helped pave the way for Josh Jacobs' I'll say elite rookie season in 2019. So, it'll be interesting to now go back after now he's been traded to the Arizona Cardinals. It'll be interesting to see if his play significantly declined in 2020, or if it was just kind of the Raiders' direction with him not fitting their timeline, whereas he does fit Arizona, his new team. So it'll be most certainly interesting to see, considering now he's one more year removed from his prime, at 31 years old. So it'll be interesting to see how he was compared to 2019, as well as how he is going forward in terms of where he falls on the list next year. Next up at number 61, I had Chargers safety Derwin James. Coming into 2020, the only reason I even had him this low was because of his health concerns. You know, he only played 5 games in 2019, but now after missing all of 2020 with a meniscus tear, it'll definitely be tough to have as much confidence in him going into 2021 as I did coming into 2020. I thought that, you know, this year we were really going to see one of the brightest and best young talents take the next step. Unfortunately, now we just have to worry about, will he even be able to kind of reach where he was back when we last saw him in 2019. Obviously won't be ranked as highly going into next season, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does come back, put together a good campaign, and then the subsequent year finds himself back into this sort of upper echelon, if that makes sense. Next up at number 60, I had Arizona Cardinals cornerback Patrick Peterson. And I'll be honest, this was a video that I was most definitely looking forward to making because I expected quite a bit of backlash on this pick. I think that, you know, people have really been hammering home this narrative that Pat Pete has completely fell off the map, and, you know, his decline has been like no other. Well, sure, he's not prime Pat Pete. He's not a top 3 cornerback in the league anymore, but just because you're not that good doesn't mean you aren't still pretty freaking good. And I just think that his decline was, and you know, I'm saying decline in air quotes, knowing that I turned the camera off, but I'm putting it in air quotes because it wasn't nearly as drastic as people made it out to be. I was actually pleasantly surprised when I put on his 2019 film, and I was very interested to see how he was going to play in 2020. I know, you know, in retrospect now, we've all seen these clips of him getting, you know, mossed by DK Metcalf or shook by Stephon Diggs. We've seen these sort of, you know, highlights, but they're actually lowlights of Patrick Peterson. But I don't think people realize that, you know, when you're playing 1,100 snaps on defense, I could, if I was clipping 2 or 3 or, you know, even 20 of those plays, I could make Jelani Tavai look like Ray Lewis, or I could make Derrick Henry look like Trent Richardson. You know, I can make the best player in the league look terrible or the worst player in the league look great. Like, there's just so many plays with football that you can't, it's just so unfair to pick out a couple bad ones and highlight and act like that's him on a regular basis. Because if he was letting up all these deep receptions and touchdowns, play in and play out, no, he wouldn't be in the league anymore. So I think it's kind of disingenuous, everybody who has been doing that. And I will be very interested to see how did he actually play in 2020, go through, evaluate the snaps, and then from there, see what I think the Vikings are getting now that they've signed him going into 2021. It'll most certainly be interesting, to say the least. Next up, with number 59, I have Cleveland Browns wide receiver Odell Beckham. He's kind of a guy similar to Pat Pete, where a lot of people, they see the statistical decline, and I think that they're making way too much of it. At least I think they were, I should say, coming into the 2020 season. He remained, in my opinion, one of the most dangerous and dynamic wide receivers in the entire league, but it will be tough to have him this high going forward now that we've seen the Browns' success without him. Plus, we obviously have the questions with his pretty serious injury there. So we don't know exactly how he's going to return to form, if he's even able to. And we've also seen where, you know, maybe he's not as number one of the weapon as I maybe thought he was coming into 2020. So, you know, kind of like I said, Nick Chubb's stock is definitely on the rise. I do think Odell's will be falling. The only question is then to what degree, and obviously we'll have to see that in film. Next up at number 58, I had Atlanta Falcons defensive tackle Grady Jarrett, and you know, for him, he was coming off of a career year in 2019, and you know, he was really establishing himself as one of the top, most disruptive interior defenders in the entire league. People were putting him in that conversation with the DeForest Buckners, Chris Joneses, and you know, I even saw people comparing him to a mini Aaron Donald. I wouldn't necessarily go that far, but it will definitely be interesting, to say the least, coming off that career year, going into what many thought was a disappointing 2020. The statistical production was slightly down, but it'll no question be interesting to see if, you know, was that just because he was that focal point on the Falcons defense and he was more constantly double teamed than he was, say, in 2019, or was it something that he was doing worse? So it'll be interesting to see, no doubt, whether he improves or declines or even stays the same in next year's list. At number 57, then I had Denver Broncos safety Justin Simmons, who he's an exciting young player to say the least. And after back-to-back elite campaigns in 2018 and 19, the only reason he was this low at 57 was really the question of whether or not he could sustain that level of production. And obviously haven't dove into all 1,000 snaps yet, but from what I've seen and from that payday that he just recently got, it seemed like he only got better in 2020. So I would most definitely expect Mr. Simmons to be on the rise going into 2021. Coming in at number 56, then I had Baltimore Ravens cornerback Marcus Peters, who, to say the least, he certainly proved his worth in Baltimore, and he did so immediately in 2019. I think he remains one of the best playmakers on the defensive side of the ball in the entire league, and it will be interesting to see, who is that clear-cut number one corner, if there even is one, between he and Marlon Humphreys. Obviously, I thought coming into 2020, I would have slightly leaned towards Peters. I thought if you put on those 2019 games, he was the one more often shutting down opposing number one wide receivers, whereas Marlon was more so out of the nickel. So it'll be interesting to go back and kind of analyze whether or not that remained the case and Marcus should be higher, or if Marlon sort of took an increased role per se, and he's now that number one defensive back going forward. At number 55, then I had Indianapolis Colts young dynamic linebacker Darius Leonard. He was one of the most well-rounded linebackers in all football, in my opinion, in 2019. The only question I had with him was, similarly to, say, a Simmons or Chubb or a lot of these younger guys that you've seen on my list, was his sustainability. And, from what I saw, he looked equally, if not even more dominant now on that Colts defense with the acquisition of DeForest Buckner. So he's another guy that I would not be shocked by any means to see him rise going into 2021. At number 54, I had Philadelphia Eagles offensive tackle Lane Johnson. And, when Lane is healthy, he's one of the top offensive linemen in all football. But now after the last two seasons, he's only played 19 of a possible 32 games. So, with that being said, it's going to be tough for him to retain such a high ranking regardless of his play, right? Because, a lot of people say that, oh, your greatest ability is durability. And, most of the time I would say that's not true. But in Lane's case, it very well might be, because that seems to be the number one thing holding him back at this point. And, the Eagles sure could have used him last season, and he really wasn't there to be counted on. So it'll be tough for him to retain that rating until he comes back and plays a full season, or nearly a full season at least, and shows us that he can still go at that elite level, because until then, I don't really see him being a top 60 guy anymore. At number 53, then, I had Cowboys running back Ezekiel Elliott. And, a lot of people might have thought this was a little bit too low for him coming into the season. I know a lot of people had high expectations for him, but for me, a lot of his success was kind of dependent on that offensive line, to say the least. And then, this year when the offensive line wasn't there, in just the absolute dumpster fire that was that Dallas offense, even Zeke couldn't shine through. So, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to reevaluate his tape and see, was that a lot on Zeke, or was it more so just the bad O-line? And either way, it'll be interesting to see whether or not I think he deserves such a high ranking, because, this past season was most certainly a disappointment for a lot of people, a lot of Cowboys fans in particular. So yeah, I definitely look forward to reevaluating him here soon. At number 52, then, I had the Philadelphia Eagles newly acquired, at the time, cornerback Darius Slay. And as a Lions fan, I can say that I was incredibly excited to see Darius in a contender, on a contender, in a contending situation in 2020. But somehow the Eagles finished even worse than the Lions, which is, not a good sign for anyone ever, right? Well, it'll be most definitely interesting to look back on his first year in Philly and see, was he one of the lone bright spots that the Eagles had, or was he also part of the problem and deserves to fall back on the list going forward? At number 51, then, I had New Orleans Saints right tackle Ryan Ramczyk, who, he's been one of the league's best tackles pretty much since as soon as he entered the league back in 2017. And after another seemingly elite 2020, it'll be tough to deny him a top 50 spot, to say the least. You could almost argue that this was already too low. I know many had him as their best right tackle in the league coming into 2020. I was slightly higher on another guy that you will see here soon, but yeah, I think it's fair to say that Ramczyk will be on the rise in the future. At number 50, then, the halfway point of the series, I had Giants running back Saquon Barkley, who, after just elite seasons, to say the least, in 2018 and 2019, I was super excited to see him in this supposedly reformed Giants offense. I was excited to see him behind Andrew Thomas and this better offensive line that the Giants were supposed to come to the table with. Well, unfortunately, a game and a half in, they weren't really good enough to prevent Saquon's unfortunate ACL tear. So it'll most definitely be difficult to keep him as a top 3 running back in 2021, as I have him here. But yeah, he's an interesting guy because similar to Derwin, great, bright future. But now the questions are no longer, for the time being, how much will he improve, but instead, will he be able to recapture what he was? And with a guy like that, it's just tough to rank them nearly as high in that subsequent season until we see them return to form. At number 49, then, I had Kansas City Chiefs right tackle Mitchell Schwartz. And, for him, after anchoring the right side of the Chiefs O-line for the last 4 years, he was not only my number 1 right tackle in the league, just ahead of Ryan Ramczyk, but he was a top 8 offensive lineman in the entire NFL, in my opinion, in my top 50. Well, after having only played 6 games this past season and then, subsequently getting released by the Chiefs just a few days ago, it'll be very interesting to see not only where he winds up, but really where things went wrong in 2020. Obviously, he had a back injury that is going to or did require surgery. Not sure if he's had it by now or not, but it'll most definitely be interesting because he was an absolute madman out there in terms of his ability to just kind of counter guys' pass rush moves and just mirror and match them off the edge. He was fantastic in 2018, 19, really all the film that I've watched with him. So it'll be interesting, as I said, where did things go wrong and where will he go going forward? Next up at number 48, I had Chargers defensive end Joey Bosa, who, pretty much annually since he entered the league, he's been one of the best edge defenders in the entire NFL. Well, it'll most definitely be interesting to reevaluate his film after a pretty injury-plagued and relatively quiet 2020. At that cap number that the Chargers are paying him, what is it, $27.5 million, I believe, per year. You got to have better production than what I saw out of Bosa in 2020 prior to really doing a deep dive into all his film. So maybe he'll prove me wrong, but from the outside looking in for right now, I'm not sure what's going to happen with Bosa in terms of my ranking heading into 2021. At number 47, I had the Baltimore Ravens young offensive tackle Ronnie Stanley, who, after Marshall Yanda's retirement, they really prioritized securing him to a massive contract extension earlier this past season. Well, obviously now, unfortunately, he soon after fractured and dislocated his ankle and was sidelined after just 6 games. So again, he's going to be another guy that's going to be tough to evaluate going forward until we see him make a return. But it will be interesting to see how he was in those 6 games that he played prior to the injury in 2020. At number 46, I had 49ers defensive end Nick Bosa, and after just finishing talking about his brother's injury-plagued season, I don't know how else to really describe Nick Bosa's obviously an incredibly unfortunate torn ACL in week 2 after what I would argue was one of the most dynamic rookie seasons by a defensive end that we've seen in recent history. Obviously, now looking back, Chase Young might have something to say about that. It'll be interesting to see where he falls on the list next year, no question. But with Bosa, it'll be definitely tough for him to retain such a high ranking coming off that injury with only 1 year of film under his belt. At number 45, then I had Houston Texans longtime defensive lineman J.J. Watt. And with him, I know this rating might seem low to a lot of people, but for him, having only played 32 of a potential 64 games between 2016 and 2019, it was tough for me to put him as high as many likely thought he was deserving of. Of course, when Watt is healthy and when he is all good to go, he's one of the best defensive linemen in the league, no question. The disruption this man has is unparalleled by most. But with him, it's again, durability is the greatest hindrance to his ability. And after an injury-free for the most part 2020 now, obviously moves to Arizona, so it'll be definitely interesting to reevaluate just how I thought he played in 2020 and where I rank him now going into 2021 on a new team where now he doesn't have to be necessarily the best player on that defense. When you have a guy like Chandler Jones, when you have Budda Baker, he can now be more of a piece opposed to the entire puzzle, and that's what has me excited about the move. But it also has me interested to rewatch, what he did this past season when he was pretty much that entire Houston Texans defense. At number 44, then I had Dallas Cowboys left tackle Tyron Smith, who, incredibly similar to J.J. Watt, actually, in terms of the sort of durability concerns. The only problem is, unlike Watt, who played in 2020, Tyron, his injuries accumulated in him only playing and strapping up for 2 games this past season, which, with that being said, it'll be tough for him to remain so highly ranked. I had him as my left tackle number 2. I had him in my top 50, one of my best offensive linemen in the league. I don't know how I could rank him, though, going forward ahead of guys like Trent Williams, ahead of the guys like, say, Laramie Tunsil, Teron Armstead, guys who have gotten more film and continued to produce a high level under their belt. Like, obviously, Tyron can still be an elite player going forward, but until I see it again, he will not be ranked this high on my list. At number 43, then I had Philadelphia Eagles defensive tackle and really defensive backbone for how many years now, Fletcher Cox. With Cox, after a decently quiet 2019, his rating would have slipped had I done a list previously. He would have been in the 20s or 30s, but after a decently quiet 2019, I was interested to see if he would bounce back in 2020. Obviously now, though, with the Eagles having been as bad as they were, I probably didn't watch as many Philadelphia Eagles games, and I certainly didn't break down as many as I would have expected nor hoped. So with that being said, it'll be interesting to evaluate him here soon this summer and see where I have him heading into 2021. At number 42, then I had Kansas City Chiefs defensive tackle Chris Jones, who, after just downright dominant 2018 and 2019 campaigns, I felt he had, pretty solidly established himself as a top 4 defensive tackle heading into this 2020 season. So with that being said, it'll obviously be interesting to see if he retains that ranking going forward, because, his statistics were slightly down. But again, as I mentioned with some other guys, is that more so due to the fact that other teams are just paying more attention to him? And, if they're paying attention to you, that means that you're freeing up other guys to make plays. So he won't get penalized in that regard if that is the case. If it's not, unfortunately, he might see that ranking slip slightly, but obviously we'll cross that bridge when we get there. At number 41, then I had Green Bay Packers wide receiver Davante Adams, who, coming into 2020 as my wide receiver 6, Davante had a career year with nearly 1,400 yards receiving and 18 touchdowns. Although, I will note, which some people might not like, it'll be interesting to go back and evaluate on the film just how much of that success was Davante and how much of it was Rodgers and just that elite Packers passing game. I've seen so many people say here recently that, he's wide receiver 1. He's the best wide receiver in the league. And, he very well might be. I'll cross that road when I get there in terms of evaluating him and his peers. But I just hate when people overreact to one 16-game season when, if your rankings are just kind of that flavor of the year, who had the best season last, I don't really think your rankings mean much, right? Obviously, a player doesn't really get that much better or worse in a single offseason. Stuff around him will change in terms of his situation, in terms of, how defenses game plan for him, but your abilities themselves aren't all that fluid to a point, right? So for people to say that, Davante wasn't top 5, now he's top 1, that just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. So it'll be interesting to see how he does improve upon his ranking and just to what extent he improved upon it in 2020 going into 2021. Next up, I had Davante Adams' former teammate, ironically enough, Los Angeles Chargers cornerback Casey Hayward. And, for him, it'll be interesting because pretty much every Charger seemingly had a down season in 2020. So it'll be tough to imagine that he remains in my top 5 corners, especially when you paired him with a guy like Chris Harris. And I'll be honest, I was expecting big things out of Casey from what I saw. Didn't really seem like that was the case, but as I've said with every guy, that's prior to a really deep dive, a sort of breakdown and analysis. So it'll be interesting to see, whether those initial thoughts kind of sustain, however you want to put it. It'll just be interesting to see whether or not he remains in my top 5 cornerbacks in 2021. Next up at number 39, my wide receiver 5, I had Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receiver and Super Bowl champion now, Mike Evans, who, to me, he's just been one of the most underappreciated guys in the entire NFL since he entered the league. He's had pretty much a historic start to his career statistically and on film. It hasn't mattered who he's played with, whether it's Jameis throwing the ball, whether it's Tom, whether he's the only weapon, whether Chris Godwin's there, whether now Antonio Brown, Rob Gronkowski, etc., whether those guys are there, he's going to get his regardless. And, with that being said, obviously his stats were slightly down in 2020, but he has a ring to show for it now. And it'll be interesting to see how his film compares to how it did previously, even though maybe the targets and numbers weren't quite there. At number 38, then I had Philadelphia Eagles center Jason Kelce, who, he was my number 1 center coming into 2020. And it'll be most definitely interesting to see after that age 33 season, whether or not he continued to live up to that standard that he has set throughout basically his entire career. It'll also be equally interesting to see, does he remain a part of the Eagles' plans here going forward? Because obviously that's a team whose timeline has pretty drastically changed here over the past 12 months. So does Kelce remain a part of those plans for the short term, at least given his age? It'll be interesting to see, or will he potentially be on the move and have to find a new spot heading into 2021? That'll be something to watch out for most definitely this offseason. At number 37, I had the Baltimore Ravens newly acquired at the time defensive lineman Calais Campbell, who, coming into his initial season with the Ravens, I was wildly excited to see the havoc that he would just wreak with guys like Matt Judon and Derek Wolfe and Brandon Williams and all these just elite playmakers and guys who had varying skill sets. I was incredibly excited to see just how that was going to work out. Well, now in retrospect, after a down year to say the least, at his age, it will be interesting to see just how he compares with his younger peers in terms of his evaluation, and ultimately whether or not he deserves to remain in the top 40 or even 50 next time around. At number 36, I had now Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers linebacker Lavonte David, who he's an interesting guy because with so much of the hype this past season in retrospect coming upon and really being sent towards fellow linebacker Devin White, I'm really excited to see how Lavonte continues to stack up going into 2021 and whether or not, was he just continuing that sort of underappreciated dominance, or did White actually sort of pass him up and become that Buccaneers best linebacker? That'll most definitely be something to be on the lookout for coming into next season as I evaluate their film from 2020, because Lavonte, he's been great, but he is getting up there in age now, whereas a guy like Devin White, more dynamic. Could he have passed Lavonte? I sort of doubt it, but at the same time, got to keep your mind open. He very well might have. We'll have to wait and see. At number 35, then I had Minnesota Vikings safety Harrison Smith. And, I expected this video to be kind of hated on as, everybody was kind of jumping off of the Smith bandwagon onto, say, Anthony Harris, right, who had a good year in 2019. Someone even say a great year, right? Well, people were jumping off Harrison Smith and calling him washed up, calling him a scrub, kind of like they are Pat Pete and other veterans that I've talked about to this point. Well, I thought it was too soon to abandon Harrison, and I think he most certainly proved me correct from what I saw in 2020. Just a fantastic season, and really wouldn't be shocked if even at his age, if I did continue to bump him up here a few spots heading into 2021, because I think he reasserted that dominance in terms of who is the best safety and best defensive back on the Vikings team. At number 34, I had Philadelphia Eagles guard Brandon Brooks, who, after a just flat-out dominant 2019 campaign, he unfortunately tore his left Achilles in prep for this season before it even began. So, on one hand, it'll be tough to imagine he remains a top 3 guard going forward. But at the same time, I do think that the Eagles sort of, kind of showed his worth in a sense in terms of, he was sorely missed on that offensive line for the Eagles and really just for that offense in general. I think everybody from Jason Kelsey to Carson Wentz to Jalen Hurts, everybody missed Brandon Brooks. And, hopefully he does return to form in 2021. But at the same time, until we see it, it'll be tough to rank him as high. At number 33, I had Cleveland Browns defensive end Myles Garrett, who, obviously this seems low now, but at the time he was coming off of his suspension shortened 2019 season. So I was interested to see how he was going to rebound. I think it's pretty safe to say after his, defensive player of the year like season, I think it's pretty safe to say that he will rise higher on my list in preparation for 2021. At number 32, I had Buffalo Bills cornerback Tre'Davious White, who, he's no question one of the best young cornerbacks in the league. And it will be interesting to kind of go back and see just how dominant he was in 2020, considering the Bills had such a breakout season. Was he substantially improved, or were teams just not even targeting him? Because they were still trying quite a bit in 2019, which surprised me. So it will be interesting to see just how he stacks up to some of his peers, and if he retains that top 4 ranking, or if he even goes even higher amongst his cornerback peers heading into next season. At number 31, I had Pittsburgh Steelers defensive back Minkah Fitzpatrick, who, you might think this is a little bit low in all honesty, considering he was coming off of a Defensive Player of the Year worthy season in his first year in Pittsburgh in 2019. Well, for me, it was just another question of, with his youth, could he sustain that production and really that dominance into 2020 and beyond? And I think that, from what I did see on or during this Pittsburgh Steelers impressive start and kind of lackluster finish, they're interesting season to say the least. I think that from what I saw, I'm excited to reevaluate his film, no question. But I think that he'll be on the rise again heading into next season. Kicking off my top 30, I had Green Bay Packers offensive tackle David Bakhtiari, who, by all accounts, he proved worthy of that rank in 2020, no question. Of course, he did suffer an injury there late in the season, so that'll be something to watch for if you're a Packers fan. But no, I think that he most certainly proved himself worthy of this rank. And what I find most interesting is, will he improve amongst his entire O-line ranking, which was O-lineman number 3, compared to some of the guards that I have coming up later? Will he ascend there as well heading into 2021? That'll be the number one thing for me to keep out for, because he most certainly will stay as the best left tackle in football, at least for next season, no question. Next up at number 29, I had the former, at this point, until he signed somewhere else, former San Francisco 49ers cornerback Richard Sherman, who, again, this is a good point to reiterate that I made this list in June of last year, prior to 2020, in which, they were coming off of a Super Bowl appearance there in San Francisco. And Sherman, at least in my opinion, he undoubtedly returned to all-pro form and was reasserting himself as a top CB in the league. Of course, now after an injury-riddled 2020, being 32 years old, it's tough to imagine that he retains such a high rank going forward. But again, depending on where he ends up here in free agency, I think he could be a really nice signing for a team looking to contend for a championship. And I wouldn't be shocked if he does have a nice season here. I just don't know if he'll be ranked as high. Going at number 28, I had Indianapolis Colts defensive lineman DeForest Buckner, who, unlike Sherman's disappointing campaign coming off that Super Bowl run, Buckner, he obviously got traded to Indianapolis, and he spearheaded the elite Colts defense in 2020. So I look for him, if what I saw in the limited bits of film that I've seen, if that's kind of what he did on a play-to-play basis, I would most definitely expect to see him in the top 25 at least, no question, going forward. He has asserted his dominance there and really kind of reformed that Colts defense in a sense, and I expect him to continue to do the same here going forward. It was tough to tell who was most responsible for that 49ers defensive success. But I think now we might have some semblance of an answer as a guy like Buckner's on the come up, and a guy like Sherman is taking a step back. So with that being said, that's why I had Buckner 28. Sticking with the trend of just dominant defensive linemen, at number 27, I had Minnesota Vikings defensive end Danielle Hunter, who coming off back-to-back 14 and a half sack seasons in 2018 and 2019. It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody to see him in my top 30. Although now, after a herniated disc ended his 2020 before it even began, and now there's rumors that he might be on his way out of Minnesota. It'll be interesting to see just what the future holds for Danielle going forward, and whether or not he can return to form, especially that 14 and a half sack form in 2021. At number 26, then I had Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson, and this was going to be my most probably controversial ranking and probably my most disliked video. In all honesty, as I just wasn't quite sold on the 2019 MVP level performance that he put out there. And we had people saying that he was the best player in football. I believe he was number one on the NFL top 100. Obviously, my list doesn't just take into account 1 year, but with a guy like him who had only had 1 real year of film under his belt, I had him as my QB5 on my list. And after a somewhat shaky 2020, I think that a lot of people, you see them backtracking on where they had Omar, and now I'm seeing him as people's QB6, QB7. And at this point, now I almost wonder if now I'm higher on Omar going forward than others are. So with that being said, it will be interesting to reevaluate and see, just how appropriate was this ranking that I gave him last summer based off that 2020 film. At number 25, then I had Dallas Cowboys offensive guard Zach Martin, who not only was he my second highest guard, he was my second highest offensive lineman in the league in general. With him, that entire Cowboys offensive line as of late has been bit by the injury bug. We already talked about with Tyron Smith. We saw Travis Frederick retire. Well, Martin only missed 2 games in his first 6 seasons in the league. He was the only guy who avoided the injury bug, and then unfortunately this season not only missed some time, but was definitely playing banged up there for Dallas. So it will certainly be interesting whether or not that play warranted rating this high going forward, or whether or not he'll take a step back. And as I said, maybe a guy like Bakhtiari will step up and emerge as that number 2 offensive lineman. At number 24, I had New Orleans Saints quarterback Drew Brees. And, there were likely going to be people hating on this ranking. In all honesty, had I got around to the video last summer, him being my quarterback 4 ahead of Lamar Jackson. But, after Drew putting together back-to-back seasons in 18 and 19 of 74% of his passes being completed, that's just insane. That's a number that is going to lead the league basically every year. And, even though you could argue that the quality of those receptions, the depth of those receptions was a little bit lesser than some of the top guys, just the fact that he was completing passes at that rate and keeping the ball away from opposing defenses and keeping the chains moving, etc. It warranted, to me, Drew being my QB4 and overall player number 24. With that being said, obviously, now having retired, I have to congratulate Drew on the Hall of Fame career. Of course, we all wish he could have gotten that second ring here, considering all that talent in New Orleans these past few years. But regardless, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. At number 23, I had Denver Broncos edge defender Von Miller. And, a lot of people were probably going to hate on this ranking as well. Well, just for perspective, Von Miller in 2019 had his first season with less than 10 sacks since 2013, which in perspective, compared to some of these other guys that people are heralding as top 5 edge rushers, that's insane, right? And when you think of that sort of production and just disruption on a year-to-year, game-to-game basis, I refuse to bail on Von after 1 down season. That being said, though, obviously now in retrospect, a non-contact injury, ankle injury, took away his 2020. So I don't really know what we're going to do with Von going forward, because now we're 2 years removed from seeing him be in that upper echelon of pass rushers. So again, as I've said with so many of these guys, it will be difficult to gauge where I rank him going forward, but I think it'll be pretty tough for him to be in the 20s yet again. Number 22, I had Pittsburgh Steelers defensive lineman Cam Hayward, and for him coming off a career year in 2019, he somehow remained one of the league's most underrated players in the entire NFL, if not the most underrated, in all honesty. Sure, when you're watching the Steelers play, you might have heard, say, TJ Watt's name called more often, or Bud Dupree's, or Devin Bush's, or sometimes Stephon Tuitt's. Well, if you put on the tape and watch what this man does in both phases in terms of stopping the run and rushing the passer, he's no question. He was no question, I should say, deserving of this top 25 grade. With that being said, though, obviously, his age 31 season this past year statistically was down a little bit. He seemed to come back to earth. So it'll be certainly interesting to get back into the film and see was that statistical production just down and the disruption remained, or was this the beginning of the sort of decline here at the end of Cam's career as he winds down? Obviously, for Steelers fans, now that Bud Dupree's gone, you have to be hoping for the former. You have to be hoping he returns to form next season if you hope to remain a top defense, but we'll obviously have to wait and see there. Similarly, at number 21, Chandler Jones, the Arizona Cardinals outside linebacker, was another player who was just outside my top 20 after an incredible 2019 19-sack season. Unfortunately, after an injury-shortened 2020, he, just like Von Miller, is going to be a tough player to evaluate going forward, whether or not he fully recovers or not. Luckily for him, though, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the Cardinals brought in J.J. Watt, so that should take some of the workload in terms of being that primary pass rusher. It should take some of that load off of Jones, but at the same time, again, we don't know how he's going to return from his injury, so we'll have to wait and see there. I will be interested to see after next season whether or not he continues to warrant such a high ranking. At number 20, I had Tennessee Titans running back Derrick Henry, who, after a historic late season and playoff run in 2019, the only question I had with Henry was whether or not he could sustain that level of production into the future. And somehow he looked even better. He had 2,000 yards, 17 touchdowns, and he'll no doubt rank higher overall and will unquestionably be my running back number one for the foreseeable future here into 2021. At number 19 and clocking in as my wide receiver number 4 on my list, I had Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver Tyreek Hill, who, I will say, despite a phenomenal season in 2020, I can't complain about 1,200 yards and 15 touchdowns. But at the same time, I will say I do think there was a greater divide between him and Travis Kelce than what we've seen previously. I think that has been a question with him in terms of who is that offensive number one threat. Obviously, Tyreek is more of the downfield guy, space the defense, stretch the field. Well, Travis is more of that underneath reliable target. And I do think that we saw that here, which I'm not going to say that it will hurt Tyreek's ranking going forward. Again, a great season, but I do think that it did sort of answer that question. If you had it coming into the season, it did answer that question between who is that number one Chiefs focal point on offense. At number 18, I had Pittsburgh Steelers outside linebacker TJ Watt. And, for him, kind of similarly to Minkah Fitzpatrick, his teammate, he was coming into 2020 off the heels of a Defensive Player of the Year worthy 2019 campaign. Obviously, with this list being more than just one season, however, I'll be honest, it didn't necessarily feel great to put him ahead of guys like Von Miller or Chandler Jones, guys that we've seen put up numbers for longer, I guess you should say. Although I felt like Watt was better in terms of a balanced player. I felt like he could do more things than those guys, and that's why I gave him the edge here at number 18. Going forward, obviously, we all know the type of season that he had. That question kind of looks a little bit silly now, and he'll no question be on the rise yet again heading into next season after just a fantastic season here in 2020, heading into 2021. At number 17, I had Kansas City Chiefs tight end Travis Kelce. And, as you can see, I thought that was a real question heading into the year, Hill versus Kelce. Which one should be ranked higher? I think that Travis, as I already mentioned, gave us an answer. He really silenced any critics that he had and, just put together an absolutely historic 2020 season. I would say look for him to rise into the top 10 heading into 2021, undoubtedly. If you had him as your tight end 2, as I did, I would say that you're definitely going to have to adjust that heading into next year just based off what we saw, even if it is just for the short term. And, he who shall not be named that we'll get to later, if Mr. Kittle is able to return to form and as Travis Kelce ages here, we might see those rankings flip back here. But for the short term, at least, Kelce is most definitely tight end number one. Coming in at number 16, I had Los Angeles Rams cornerback Jalen Ramsey, who, after a questionable 2019 where he was traded obviously from Jacksonville to LA, a lot of people were souring on Jalen. Well, he's another one of those veterans for me that, if you want to say Pat Pete turned out bad, or if you want to say Von Miller looks bad in retrospect, well, Jalen is most certainly in the camp of, say, a Harrison Smith, where it's another guy where their talent's undeniable. They've been an elite player for X amount of years. They, maybe they don't play to their best in a particular season, but that doesn't mean to abandon ship entirely. And Jalen's a great example of that. The man can do it all against the pass, against the run. He's just one of the best cornerbacks in the league, if not the best cornerback in the league going forward. Not to spoil my rankings, my potential rankings heading into 2021, but I mean, he got his second first-team All-Pro. I don't think there's any denying that 16 was a pretty fair spot for him, and if anything, maybe a little bit too low. At number 15, I had, at the time, obviously, New York Jets safety Jamal Adams, now a member of the Seattle Seahawks, who, in my opinion, he's easily the most disrespected player in the entire NFL. I'm excited to reevaluate him to see just how much that scheme change from New York to Seattle impacted him, but he's just another guy where you can't let yourself be fooled by these lowlights per se that you see on Twitter or on Instagram or on social media where they make Jamal out to look bad. Similarly to, say, Patrick Peterson, as I talked about earlier. You could make the best player look like a bum and a scrub look like the next coming of a top player, right? An all-pro guy. And Jamal Adams, he is that all-pro guy that to me is just being painted in an incredibly unfair light because, no, he doesn't have very many interceptions. Well, that's not necessarily his role. I get that people see, oh, he's a safety. Well, there's a big difference between an in-the-box safety and sort of a hybrid safety as Adams is compared to Kevin Byard, let's say, or Justin Simmons, or guys who primarily play that deep half, deep third, deep zone that can really play forward and get a jump on balls that way. For a guy like Adams, whose first step is automatically forward, it's tough to work backwards then and make plays and react in the passing game. So sure, he's better against the run than he is against the pass. I don't think that means that he's a scrub or anything that you hear on social media. As I said, I think he most definitely was deserving of this top 15 ranking. And I'll be interested to see going forward whether or not that holds, especially as he was my number one safety in the league. At number 14, I had New Orleans Saints defensive lineman Cameron Jordan, who, again, is just one of the most underrated guys in the entire league to me. I think that his lack of flashiness kind of hurts his popularity and really mainstream appeal compared to, say, a Von Miller, Chandler Jones, guys like that I've already covered. But, he was unquestionably one of the most disruptive defenders, just players flat out, I should say, in the entire league last year and really for this previous 4 or 5 year stretch that he's been on here. I will say, obviously, statistical production was slightly down in 2020. So again, like Cam Hayward, it'll be a question of, was he actually playing worse, or was he just attracting more attention? And the disruption was still there, just the production was not. Because again, you can make a play without making the tackle. I think that's an important distinction that a lot of NFL fans don't quite realize, that just the counting stats don't tell the whole story. Cameron's a guy where I think that's definitely the case, and I'm interested to see to what extent that was the case going forward this past season as I go forward to make my 2021 list. Next up at number 13, I had the newly acquired Arizona Cardinals wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins, who, he was my wide receiver number 3 before 2020, and I think he again proved himself worthy of such a high ranking, despite changing teams this past season. I think that he obviously had a dominant first year with Kyler and the Cardinals. I'm excited to see what he's able to do going forward, and honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if he, maybe not overall if his ranking climbs, but I wouldn't be shocked if I have him higher than wide receiver 3 going forward, just based off the seasons that the number 2 and number 1 guy had. I do think though that he continues to be just one of the best receivers in the league, and at the same time, I should say it'll be also interesting to see how he played compared to say a Devontae Adams or Stephon Diggs or guys like that who were behind him, pretty notably behind him in my eyes. How those guys in their more breakout seasons compared to what I think a lot of people would say is just a regular year for DeAndre. So we'll have to kind of monitor that going forward. But no, I think that coming into the year, I had him 13, and in retrospect, I don't have any problem with that ranking. Really overall. At number 12, I had Carolina Panthers running back Christian McCaffrey, who, after an insane 2019 campaign, CMC was easily my running back number one. However, the reason he was, so low compared to, I say so low as if 12 is low, but the reason I had him at 12 opposed to say, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, et cetera, was just because of his sample size. And, for him, unfortunately, the sample size didn't really get much larger in 2020. Obviously, an assortment of injuries held him back. Of course, he remains one of the most dynamic playmakers in the entire NFL. He's just going to have to, in my opinion, return to form and silence those sort of durability concerns to re-enter that running back number one discussion with Derrick Henry going forward. Because as I said, right now, it's not a debate. Henry's that number one guy. But if that sort of heavy workload does start to wear and tear on Henry and CMC puts together another good campaign, I wouldn't be shocked if those rankings do flip back to where I had them. At number 11, I had San Francisco 49ers tight end George Kittle, who, similarly to Christian McCaffrey, he was my number one ranked tight end heading into the 2020 season. But obviously, he had his year cut short due to injuries again. So, as I said with CMC and Derrick Henry, I'll say it again with Travis Kelce and George Kittle. I think that he's going to need to come back and have an elite 2021 to re-enter that tight end number one discussion. Because, even though with Kelce, I'll say that there's more, in my opinion, that Kittle does well. I think he's a better run blocker, no question. One of the best that I've ever seen from that tight end spot. You can't run block from the training room, right? As harsh as that may sound. So with Kittle, I'm going to need to see him on the field. And even though, he is younger than Kelce, he has 4 years on him. That is an older 27, right? With his physical style of play, he's not some young chipper guy at this age. And the question is again, will he be able to return to form and potentially even build upon where he was previously? I think that he certainly has the chance and has the time to re-enter that top tight end conversation. But as of right now, it's really no debate. And speaking of no debate, as we enter the top 10 here, I have Indianapolis Colts offensive lineman Quentin Nelson, who, he's my number one lineman. He's my number one guard. After this year, he played a couple snaps at tackle. Some people might have him as their number one tackle. Quentin Nelson, I don't really know what there is to say. Just one of the most physical, strong guys that we have in the league and have had in the league for quite some time. So he's pretty much everything you could ask for out of a guard currently. I would say, as a former offensive lineman, I was looking forward to doing this video. There are some slight technical things that I think he could build upon, but the gap's already so big. If he continues to sharpen his technique, then I don't even know where he's going to go in the top 5, maybe. I don't even know at this point. But no, he's my offensive lineman number one, and I don't expect that to change for the foreseeable future. At number 9, I had Green Bay Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers. And, this was probably one of my more controversial picks as well, because everybody was selling on Aaron Rodgers. Even his team was selling on him in drafting Jordan Love in the first round to be his replacement. I remember there were people saying that Rodgers was no longer a top 10 QB. I had one guy ask me to rank who I thought was better than Jimmy Garoppolo, and when I said Aaron Rodgers, they said that he was washed, and that seemed to be the common sentiment coming into 2019. So I fully expected this to be a controversial video, but now, again, kind of like Ramsey and Smith in retrospect, I think it might be controversial the other way. If I put him at number 9 after this season, people would freak out because just a historic season. To me, he was a top 3 QB. I think he most certainly he proved that again in 2020, to say the least. The only question now is, as he continues to climb in age, how long is he going to be able to maintain that level of play? I don't really think that has much bearing, though, going forward. just in terms of ranking him over the summer, he's most certainly going to be higher than 9, and he's probably going to be higher than QB3. In all honesty, after just the magnificent campaign that he put together here as the 2020 MVP. Unlike Rodgers, then, who really silenced those critics, in my opinion, with his play in 2020, I think that my number 8 player, Falcons wide receiver Julio Jones, he's only letting the critics get louder. When he's playing, he's great, but it's another one of those guys where the durability is starting to become an issue now. And I just remember watching multiple Falcons games where he's sitting out of critical plays, critical drives, clutching his hamstring, getting it worked out on the sidelines, and it just comes to a point where, are you really the second best wide receiver in football when I can't count on you on 3rd and 10? I don't know. It's an interesting discussion to be had, and he was my number 2 wide receiver. Will he be again? I would say it's probably unlikely, but again, it's not somebody that you can just bail on. With that being said, just because he had a down year doesn't mean he's no longer an elite player or a top 100 player. It's just a guy who maybe took a step back, and maybe he will, be able to return to form. Maybe he won't. Maybe it is the beginning of the end for a guy like Julio. I don't think staying on the field gets easier with age, so I wouldn't be shocked if it's the sort of beginning of the end. But no, I don't think that it's some sudden drop-off of Julio where people are having him ranked the second best wide receiver on his team. To me, that's blasphemous and will be until we see something in Julio's play that undermines him being an elite receiver. I don't think we've seen that yet. We've just seen him not on the field as much as we'd like, if that makes sense. Coming in at number 7 overall, I had my number 1 inside linebacker, Seattle Seahawk, Bobby Wagner, who, ever since Luke Kuechly retired, I don't think that there's been much debate for who that best linebacker is, in all honesty. You'll hear names tossed around, 2 guys who had breakout years, right? Oh, Fred Warner, oh, Eric Kendricks, guys like that. Similar to, as I was talking about with Devontae Adams earlier, until those guys can put together and string together multiple number 1 linebacker worthy seasons, or until the number 1 linebacker starts to decline noticeably, Bobby Wagner's number 1, plain and simple. And I had him in the top 10 after last season. I'll be interested to see whether or not I retain him there after 2020. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see if the gap is as wide as I thought it was heading into next season. Because, who was the last inside linebacker I even had? Levante David in the 30s? I don't think that anybody was particularly close. Will that gap shrink? That'll be, to me, the main question with Bobby, because at this point, I don't really expect him to be usurped here until he does take a step back, which doesn't seem very likely. At number 6, then, I had the 2019 Defensive Player of the Year, cornerback, New England Patriots, Stephon Gilmore, who obviously he was my number 1 cornerback this summer when I made the list. Of course, now in retrospect, the Patriots, they as a whole, underwhelmed in 2020. So it will be, as much as I've said this to this point, it'll be interesting to see, whether or not Gilmore retained his 2019 standard of play on just a bad team, or was he a part of that problem as well? And actually, he should begin to fall. Did he compare favorably to, say, Jalen Ramsey, or did that script flip and now next year he's going to see himself sort of tumbling down the list a couple spots? That'll be, to me, one of the most interesting things to look out for as we prep for my next iteration of the list going into 2021. When I said at number 15 that Jamal Adams was the most undeservingly hated player in the NFL, I kind of forgot who I had at number 5 in terms of New Orleans Saints wide receiver Michael Thomas, who, the amount of hate that this man gets is abysmal, in my opinion. He is, to me, at least he was, I'll say, was my number 1 wide receiver heading into the year. And I think the amount of flack that he gets, even before the injury-riddled 2020, was ridiculous. People call him slant boy. People call him a bum. People call him a scrub. All these different things. I couldn't disagree more. To me, he was a top 5 player in the league, and even with those injury concerns, I'm still going to have him pretty high next year, to say the least. Before this season, he had never had a year under under 1,100 yards. Let that sink in. You look at a guy like Devontae Adams, who sure he had a breakout year, but look at the chunk of their careers compared to each other, and it's really no comparison. He's continued then to annually improve upon those totals year after year after year after year, which ultimately accumulated in his insane 1,725 yard 2019. Like, those numbers are just insane. And if you think he's just getting them on slants, not only are you wrong, but that would actually be more impressive when defenders know exactly what route you're running and they can't stop you. I just don't quite understand the hate here for Michael Thomas. We've seen him do it. We've seen him do it with Drew Brees. We've seen him do it with Bridgewater. We've seen him do it with Kamara, without Kamara. We've seen him do this 1,000+ yard production, 1,400 yard season, 1,700 yard season, this, that, the other, year after year after year, whether he's a rookie, a 5-year veteran. I don't understand it. And I had him as my wide receiver one. I wouldn't be shocked if he's still my wide receiver one. Whereas, again, he's a guy that I've seen outside of people's top 5s and top 10s in present day. So just because of one bad injury riddled season, you're going to completely abandon ship. That's insane to me. I will not be shocked if what I saw from other guys this year did not supersede what I've seen from him in the past, because to me, coming into the year, nobody did it like Michael Thomas, and I don't really know if they started over the past couple months. He's number 5. Coming in at number 4, I had Chicago Bears outside linebacker Khalil Mack, who, while his statistical production was down in 2019, and I thought I would get some hate on this pick then, at the time, I will say he remained one of, if not the second most impactful and disruptive defender in all of football. I will say that now, after a similarly questionable 2020 in terms of his statistical production, he's another guy that we're going to have to revisit and see. Is he still garnering the same number of double teams? Is he still garnering the same number of chip blocks by running backs? Is he still garnering the same number of slide protections in his direction, et cetera, et cetera? All those things that made him so great in previous years when he was overcoming those things. Is he at least still garnering them? And then that will provide sort of the baseline for his ranking going forward, because I don't expect to have him number 4, but also I don't expect him to drop crazy far down the list, because, again, you don't bail on guys with this sort of elite talent, and Khalil Mack most certainly will not be much lower on my list next time around. Coming in at number 3, I think at this point we all know the players. The only question is the order. Well, at number 3, I had my number 2 overall QB, Seattle Seahawks Russell Wilson. And, for him, people now would probably have him ranked outside the top 10. Well, to me, it's crazy to think that, he quote-unquote struggled late in the year and still finished with 40 touchdowns, 4,200 yards, completing 69% of his passes. I hope people can put that into perspective, regardless of, a slightly increased interception number. I hope you can realize just the standard that shows that this man has set for himself. We could debate whether or not he deserved the 2019 MVP, which obviously Lamar won. We could debate that, but to me, to think that he could be on the move this offseason, even though the Bears, sure, they signed Dalton now, so maybe he won't be. But just the fact that his name is even in rumors is an absolute disgrace. And we got to stop the madness, because even if you do think he should drop a few spots, this man is still a top quarterback in the league, no question. And even if Rodgers does come into the number 2 spot, or, maybe you think a guy like Josh Allen is proving himself to be up here, or say Deshaun Watson, etc. I'll put my chips in on Russell Wilson any day of the week until he shows us something that actually looks like struggles, because 4,200 and 69% just doesn't look like it to me. And from the film I've watched, I know that says the same thing. So we'll see where I have him next year, but I don't expect it to be much lower than this. Coming in at number 2, we had the only quarterback I obviously had higher than Russell Wilson is none other than Kansas City Chiefs Patrick Mahomes. And I really don't even know what there is to say about him at this point. Most of you would probably want to know why I don't have him number one. So I will say it goes back to the sort of core concept of the series, and sort of the main purpose of this series was to try my best to separate a guy's talents from his situation and talk about what they do that makes them so special and would make them special on a universal level. So my main concern with Mahomes in that regard is that I've never really seen him without Travis Kelce, without Tyreek Hill, without Andy Reid, et cetera, et cetera. And those are not slouches. Those are two guys that are also in my top 20. That's a coach that would be in probably my top two. Like, that's the sort of talent that we're talking about here. So with Mahomes, then, I think we sort of saw this in the Super Bowl when he was running for his life. When the situation wasn't just right, he did struggle. And not saying I predicted that. Obviously, I predicted the Chiefs to win. Most people did, but I do think that is the question. It's how is he when the situational factors start to worsen, right? And that was obviously a big concern I had with him signing that huge deal, is that was sort of inevitable to begin to see the situational factors worsen. And the only question then will be, would his play maintain, or would it begin to sort of proportionally decrease? And I think this year he obviously had a fantastic season. Going into next year, I would expect him to have a similar ranking in terms of my QB1. It'd be interesting to see where he ranks with this next guy who, I'll get right into it, is Los Angeles Rams defensive tackle Aaron Donald. And who else, honestly? He's the most disruptive player that I've ever seen play the sport in my entire life. And unfortunately, I obviously am too young to have watched Lawrence Taylor, but he's got to be in that discussion for all time, considering the position that he plays. I mean, just he's completely transcended and revolutionized anything that we've ever seen at that defensive tackle spot. You talk about, I don't know how many of you guys are basketball fans, but we talk about Steph Curry as having, revolutionized the three-point shot. And then you look at all these sort of, copycats in a sense, the Trae Youngs, Damian Lillards, guys like that, who are adding those long 32, 33-foot shots into their game. And, for good reason. That's why we all think so highly of Curry. Well, look at what a guy like Donald did to the defensive tackle spot. I mean, we were in an era where it was dominated by guys like Ndamukong Suh, Gerald McCoy, Geno Atkins, who are all fantastic players in their own right. But what Donald does in terms of the impact he has on the game is completely different than those guys. Completely different. You talk about a guy who brings edge production to a defensive tackle spot. You can't really game plan out a defensive tackle. You can consistently every play send a running back or a tight end or slide your line towards an edge player, right? You could roll out away from an edge player. What are you supposed to do when that player's already, in the interior of the defensive line? There's really not much you could do except double, sometimes triple team him, right? And that's why I think you see so much of what you see out of the guys around him, right? You look at, say, Corey Littleton. The man had 134 tackles the year before in Los Angeles, a career year, no question. Goes to Oakland, goes to Las Vegas, I should say, and returns back to a measly 80 tackles. Well, that's the difference between having a guy like Aaron Donald in front of you compared to Mo Hurst. Like, I just don't know. I don't know how people don't see this. Or, you look at Leonard Floyd. He was considered a bust by more than 50% of the league probably coming into his tenure with the Rams. Next thing you know, he's signing a massive extension for them to keep him in town. And I just don't think that people realize that so much of that comes back to Aaron Donald. You always have to be sending two guys his way, and now you have just straight one-on-ones across the rest of the O-line, unless you want to, have more blockers, and then you're helping your secondary. Why do you think a guy like Ramsey was able to revitalize his career as good as he already is? Why do you think a guy like Troy Hill and Darius Williams, why do you think that they're so effective? So much of it comes back to Aaron Donald. And that's why, to me, it's kind of a joke when people argue against him to get a Defensive Player of the Year award. Like, yeah, sure, maybe his counting stats weren't as good as TJ Watt, but, there's no question in Los Angeles who the force multiplier is. It's Aaron Donald. When I look at Pittsburgh, we're talking about a defensive front that's filled with all pro level players, right? Cam Hayward, Watt, Dupree, Tuitt. Like, we're talking about elite talent. So of course Watt's numbers should be a little bit better because you can't just all out double team TJ Watt. You can't slide your protection all the way to TJ because then you have Bud Dupree flying off the edge. With Donald, that just hasn't been the case. And it can't be the case really because of his inherent position. So he's number one. He was number one coming into the year, I should say. He will remain number one as we do our 2021 list, and he will probably remain number one until he shows any signs of decline, which so far, I mean, the rest of the league is praying for it, but I haven't seen it yet. With that being said, though, I do hope that if any of you were, disappointed that I wasn't able to finish the series this summer, that you did make it this far into the video and enjoyed it in some capacity, whether it was interesting, entertaining. I know the top 100 videos, it was an ambitious project to say the least. Nobody had really done it before on YouTube, from what I've seen, on their own at least. And I know for me, just putting 10, 15, 20 hours into a video, eventually it caught up to me, right? And I wasn't able to finish the series as I had hoped, but hopefully this makes up for it in some regards. So now that is obviously in the rear view, we won't return to a top 100 series until, as I said, we do it in some capacity this summer. It might be one video, might be 10, might be 20. I'm not exactly sure yet. Maybe I'll just do one long video like this because this is pretty fun. Although I do like showing you guys clips to kind of support my case. But as I said, I'm not a big highlights guy. So at the same time, I don't like showing clips because then you might think that that those pass rush moves are what Donald does every play, and it's realistically not. He loses reps just like everybody else does. But no, so we won't return to our top 100 series until most likely this summer in some capacity. So from here on out, at least until the draft, maybe even through the draft, we're going to have those prospect scouting report videos here soon. As I said, I should have a couple of them coming out today when this is posted. I believe it'll be Sunday, March 21st when this comes out. Look forward to Javonte Williams, Travis Etienne, and then we'll probably go 2 a day for the foreseeable future until we at least run the vault dry. I know we have, as I mentioned earlier, 10 running backs already done, so that should be a good 5 days or so worth of content, and then yeah, we'll keep going from there. So as I said, if you guys made it this far, I really appreciate if you were not only able to watch this video, but if you were able to just stay subscribed and wanted to stay subscribed over these past few months. If you did somehow make it to this point, make sure you leave a like, you comment on the video, tell me that you made it all the way through, tell me something. Tell me what would you like to see out of the channel next. Obviously, maybe draft videos aren't your cup of tea, so what would you like seeing next? Obviously, I love the off season for what it is. After the draft, last year I did team recap videos. I could do something similar like that again, or we could get right into my top 100, my updated top 100 series of sorts, depending on how you guys want that series. I'd love to hear if you thought 100 small videos, if you enjoyed that more, or if you thought something like this would suffice. Just let me know. Any support, any feedback, any criticism is always greatly appreciated. But no, with that being said, I'm mic'd up. Now I'm micing out. Hopefully I'll see you guys on Javonte Williams and in the rest of the draft videos. Peace.